4, 3, 2, 1.
Jumbo, see Jumbo, everyone. Welcome to Richard Allinger Presents Lessons in Church History. And I'm going to take, before I get into the program, I'm going to take a few minutes for Black History Moments because, as you all know, February is Black History Month. So we're going to take a few moments in Black history. And as I spoke in previous sessions about the Lighthouse Bible and Herb Shop out in Swartz Creek on Miller Road, they're having a sale on all these different Bibles, and this is a King James Version super giant print Bible that they're going to give you for 25% off all Bibles. And I'm going to take this giant print Bible out of its cover that I just got at the Lighthouse out in Swartz Creek, and in my Black History Moment, this book is full of Black history, the Holy Bible. And here is the first moment in Black history that I'm going to read to you out of the Old Testament. And, oh, by the way, these giant print Bibles are King James Version that they have out there. They'll give you at the Lighthouse 25% off. And this is our first Black History Moment here in Numbers chapter 12. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek above all men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses, and said unto Aaron and unto Miriam, Come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of the cloud, and stood in the door of the tabernacle, and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow, and Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O Lord God, I beseech thee. And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not until Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from Hazeroth, and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. Now, Paran in the Old Testament, which I've just read out of Numbers chapter 12, is Mecca in Saudi Arabia today. And as you know, as Abraham was journeying to Egypt because of the famine in Canaan, he built an altar and prayed in a city just outside of Mecca. That's Holy Land over there, my friends. That's Holy Land. Mecca is close to Mount Sinai, where God gave Moses the Ten Commandments. All right, and then we're going to leave the Old Testament and go to the New Testament for another moment in church history. Matthew chapter 27, New Testament. And it's for a moment in black history. The New Testament. I'll start reading. This would be Matthew chapter 27, and this will be. Before I read this, I have to tell you that this account is when Jesus stood before Pilate and Herod, and as you know, Pilate was the Roman governor trying to control Jewry and the Jews, and Herod was the king of he was a Jewish monarch of the Hebrews. He was king of the Jewish monarchy at that time when Christ was here himself in his divine incarnation to testify of our Father which is in heaven and to glorify him through working miracles and his death, which was our salvation. And as you know, the Roman governor Pilate didn't like the Jewish monarch Herod, and Herod didn't like Pilate, and Pilate didn't like Herod. But the day that Christ was crucified, they became friends. And because I am your church history teacher, and last October on my program I told you this is the 475th anniversary of the 95 Thesis that Martin Luther wrote against the Roman Catholic Church back in 1517. And the reason I bring this up to you is because Martin Luther, really, for writing those things which are wrong in the Roman Catholic Church as a Roman Catholic priest, he actually was excommunicated by the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. And then being excommunicated, he started the Lutheran denomination back in the 16th century. But the reason I'm going back there right now with you is because just like Herod didn't like Pilate and Pilate didn't like Herod, historically the Roman Catholics have never liked the Protestants since the Protestant Reformation started 500 years ago, and the Protestants didn't like the Roman Catholics. But today, up here in the 21st century, even back in the 20th century, they started becoming friends. And they're in their collusion of power, they're actually kind of rejecting the things of Christ and how they're coming together. I don't know with any twisted imagination how this being February, St. Patrick Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day is coming up this month, February 14th, and he was like someone that preceded the protest of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, even before Savonarola in the 12th and 13th century, even before Peter Waldo and Martin Luther and John Wycliffe. There was Saint Valentine back in the 4th century, and he was a Christian man, and he was very vocal about his opposition to as the bishops in the Roman Church, which later began to aspire to power to become the Pope in the 5th century, like Gregory the Great, they started wrongfully saying that they're infallible and the Bible is what the popes of the Roman Catholic Church, say it to be. And they actually have said that Virgin Mary's virginity was perpetual. And, St. Valentine, who was martyred in Rome, he spoke out against this and said her virginity could not be perpetual because she had 4 boys and 2 girls after she had Jesus. Virgin Mary had 7 kids. So the Pope, and he's saying things that Jesus never taught. And so this is St. Valentine in the 4th century. He even spoke out against infant baptism. And for this, because Christ never taught to sprinkle infants, in baptism. And like I said, the Baptists have never baptized infants. But leaving that time period, because I'll be going up into that time to finish Martin Luther's 95 Thesis in future programs. But because this is Black History Month, I want to get into the New Testament Black History moment of right here. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him, and put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand, and they bowed the knee before him, and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit upon him, and took the reed, and smote him on the head. And after that they had mocked him, they took the robe off him, and put his own raiment on him, and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him, and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they washed him there, and set up over his head his accusation written, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. In Greek, it's Iesus, Niesus, Rexion, and that means Jesus the Nazarene, King of the Jews. It was written in Greek, it was written in Latin for the Romans, and it was written in Hebrew for the Sanhedrin, who put the Roman soldiers up to doing this. Then were there 2 thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God, let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. Now, in our Black History moment, Simon of Cyrene is, if you look at this map here, this is the map of the dispersion of the 3 sons of Noah after the ark landed in the Pentateuch, Genesis chapter 9, verse 1, and it says, These are the 3 sons of Noah, and of them the whole earth was overspread. And when you look at this, you will see that Africa, where Cyrene is at, Libya today, it's by Libya, Liberia, West Africa, and so on, Ethiopia, is all the land of Ham. Ham's descendants, Ham, Japheth, and Shem, Ham went over by China and India, and then Ham went also to Africa. Ham even kind of went all 4 different directions. Ham, he's everywhere. And it says in the Old Testament that in the land of Ham, Yahweh performed many miracles. In the land of Ham, that's where all the miracles happened, this Holy Land. And this is where Simon of Cyrene was from. The Ham is that dark black area, and then the brownish area is Shem. Messiah came out of Shem, and then the Japheth would be up here in Europe, the Caucasus Mountains. That's why they call the Japhites Caucasians. Now that we've had these few moments of Black history because February is Black History Month. I'm going to put this giant print Holy Bible back in its case. This is the King James Version, super giant print for those people that might have trouble seeing. And I'm going to digress to this book, which is available upon asking. It's on the shelves at Sunshine Bible Bookstore out at 5073 West Court Street out by Carmen Ainsworth High School, Christianity Through the Centuries. And in our moments of Black history, I'm going to digress back to this book. I was reading from this in previous sessions, and I'm going back in this book, Christianity Through the Centuries, to the 18th century for moments of Black history. You'll have to please excuse me. I'm sorry I didn't have it readily marked where I could quickly go to it, but here it is. I have to cite these, this right here about Black history. We're going back to the 1700s, the 18th century. The church in America was also interested in social reform during the 19th century. Revivalism created an atmosphere antagonistic to the prevalent practice of dueling with pistols or swords. The tragic death of Alexander Hamilton in a duel with Aaron Burr, coupled with propaganda from the pulpit, soon brought the practice to an end. The interest of the church in social reform also slowly brought about the abolition of imprisonment for debt and promoted prison reform. During the 19th century, when I say the 19th century, in your mind, you go back to the 1800s, the 19th century. That's the 1800s. And earlier, the church became interested in the problem of liquor. In 1784, Benjamin Rush exploded the theory that intoxicants were beneficial to the body and called on the churches to support a temperance movement based on total abstinence. The Methodists, who have always had a keen interest in social problems, demanded that their members neither sell nor use intoxicants. Presbyterians and Congregationalists soon followed suit. Before long, numerous temperance societies were formed to promote abstinence and to battle the liquor interests. The National WCTU was organized in 1874 to promote abstinence from liquor. The Anti-Saloon League, 1895, a federation of temperance agencies, was the most important of these. After World War I, the realization that liquor incited people to commit crime, that liquor and modern machinery would not mix safely, and that 33 states had state prohibition aided the work of the League. In other words, around 1920, it was illegal to even manufacture and sell liquor. It was against the law to sell marijuana, but now they have medicinal marijuana clinics. But, you're not supposed to make your liquor at home. That was called moonshine. You shouldn't do that, but people were illegally making liquor. But there was a time of prohibition here of liquor. In 1920, the 18th Amendment put prohibition into force until its repeal in 1933. Now, before I go on into this, I'm going to take this is my purified bottled water. Being in Flint, Michigan right now, we have an issue with where most of the citizens are not drinking city water right now, and so I'm going to put a plug in for my personal friend, Paul Herring. I want to see him win the 5th City of Flint Council seat in 2018, because he's up on this water issue with Flint and getting us. He's going to do something about getting us, if elected, some good water. So right now I'm drinking from purified drinking water because I can't drink it from the faucet because of the issue of water in our city right now. Please vote for Paul Herring and when he runs for the 5th Ward in the Flint City Council in 2018. He's going to get to the bottom of the problem and make sure we get good drinking water. All right, and Eric Mays told me he's going to get on it too, the 1st council seat, and Jackie Poplar. All right, getting back to the Black History moment, in the colonial era, blacks usually worshipped from the gallery in white churches. In other words, like if you went out to a big church on Bristol Road, like the Central Church of the Nazarene. I don't know if you've ever been there, out by where I worked for 31 years at the Flint Metal Fabrication Plant out there by Bishop Airport. The Nazarenes put a big Central Church of the Nazarene out there too, on Bristol Road, just down from our factory. And they have a big sanctuary, auditorium, and then they even have a big balcony upstairs. And back in colonial times, really, the Methodist churches would have the black folks worship from the gallery or put them in a balcony, in white churches. So Richard Allen, being an African, Richard Allen, from 1760, now we're going back now to before the American Revolution, and I'll talk to you about how Richard Allen happened to be here in North America because of missionary work and slave trade. But right now, we're going to Richard Allen in 1760 to 1831, who purchased his freedom for $2,000, was converted, and became a Methodist circuit rider for 3 years. See, the slave owners tried to keep their slaves ignorant and didn't want them to read, because if they could learn how to read, they would learn how to read the Bible and learn of their salvation. And Satan wants to keep people ignorant of their privileges in Christ Jesus. But this man was very literate. Richard Allen and his friend, who I'm going to talk about now, Absalom Jones, started one of the largest African American denominations in the world. All right. He then attended St. George. Richard Allen then attended St. George Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. When blacks who were praying on their knees were ordered out in 1787, Allen and Absalom Jones led them. They organized Bethel Church. Other black churches joined with them to form the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That's called the AME for short, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, in 1816, and Allen became its first bishop. It grew to 20,000 in 1856. Now this was the time, 1856, the AME had grown to 20,000 around the time Abraham Lincoln was president, 1856, and the Civil War. There was 2,000 Africans in the AME church at that time, and more than 3.5 million in 1994. In 1994, there was 3.5 million people in the AME church. The African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church was organized in 1821 and has over 2 million members now. And you cannot leave this church without speaking of its great Lot Carey. From 1780 to 1828 became a black Baptist missionary in Sierra Leone, West Africa, from 1821 to 1828. Blacks have favored the Methodist and Baptist churches. In other words, blacks mostly historically, once they have been brought to America and converted to Christ, if they weren't already Christians, because many Africans worshiped God in Africa and knew him on the boats coming over here and prayed. So, but as you know, once they begin to multiply over here, because the first Africans here, 25 of them were brought over here from a slave trade in Africa. They were brought from Africa over the ocean to Brazil, the Atlantic Ocean, over the Atlantic Ocean to Brazil, and up from Brazil to the Caribbean islands, and up from the Caribbean islands, I think in 1625, to Jamestown, Virginia. And these 25 Africans turned into hundreds of thousands of people, and that's why you have these large AME denominations of millions of people. All right. During the first half of the 19th century, now that's the 1800s, slavery became a serious problem that the churches had to face. As early as 1769, just before the American Revolution, Congregationalists and Rhode Island spoke out against slavery in an attempt at amelioration of the condition of slaves between 1729 and 1830. John Woolman's journal, 1756 to 1772, describes the devoted efforts of the godly Quakers to persuade others to emancipate their slaves. The Quakers mostly, as the 13 colonies, all were different denominations because in the 1700s, because denominations was happened subsequently because of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. And in the future sessions we'll talk about, is the Protestant Reformation over? Because that was 500 years ago. And the Quakers came over here in colonial times and stayed mostly in Pennsylvania. And they were abolitionists. They were trying to persuade others to emancipate their slaves. About 1833, Lane Seminary in Cincinnati became the center of an anti-slavery movement led by students. Theodore Weld, 1803 to 1895, and Finney's convert and writer, Charles Finney, he was a revivalist, convert and writer of the influential Slavery as It Is in 1839, were also abolitionists. This movement aimed at the abolition of slavery from 1831 to 1860. When the seminary authorities attempted to ban the movement, the students migrated to Oberlin College. The American Anti-Slavery Society was founded in 1833. Inspired such people as the editor of the Liberator, William L. Garrison, and poet John Greenleaf Whittier. Now I will stop here because we're going to break for a few moments, and I hope that you come back. Because February is Black History Month, in the next session, if you come back, we're going to be talking about Freedom Day, which is February 1st, and the Juneteenth Committee.
girl. Nicole, good luck on the play tonight. You're welcome. What's up, guys? Now you're going to make sure that you return those on Monday, right? Thank you. Oh, nice.
We'll talk to you for a second. Go ahead, no. Give me water. Come on, let me get your water. Just get out the way.
Everybody, for Richard Allinger Presents Lessons in Church History, and I'm just taking a few moments for Black History because, as you know, February is Black History Month. In the previous session, I was talking about how Flint Public School System actually named one of their junior high schools next to Flint Central after the poet and abolitionist John Greenleaf Whittier. Whittier Middle School or Junior High School. My mother attended back in the 30s before she graduated from Mount Morris High School in 1941. And then also other abolitionists were educator Jonathan Blanchard and author Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and the abolitionist movement grew rapidly. So you here in Flint can know that Whittier Junior High School was named after a man that helped abolish slavery, Whittier. At the same time, slavery was becoming an apparent economic necessity in the South for the production of cotton for the increasing number of textile factories in New England and England. Attempts to end slavery by religious persuasion split several denominations. The Wesleyan Methodist Church was organized in 1843 on the basis of no slave-owning membership after many people withdrew from the Methodist Episcopal Church. A Southern Baptist Convention was organized in 1845 because of the opposition of Northern Baptists to slavery. In the same year, the Methodist Episcopal Church South was founded. Southern Presbyterians from both the New and Old School groups split in 1857 and 1861 over slavery and theology. They united to form the Presbyterian Church in the United States in 1864. The Presbyterians, Methodists, and Episcopalians reunited, but the Southern Baptist Convention of the Southern Baptist Convention of 1845 did not reunite with its northern counterpart. But despite the schisms, one should remember that the church conscientiously faced the slavery issue as a social problem to be solved. When the Civil War came, churches on both sides of the line did their best to bring aid to the needy and suffering. The resort to arms in the Civil War and the 13th Amendment ended slavery. You know, the 13th Amendment was the one that Abraham Lincoln signed, which was the great Emancipation Proclamation, which abolished slavery now and forever. But segregation was continued until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, after the tragic assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and the 1968 Democratic National Convention nominee to run as president of that year, Robert Kennedy, was assassinated. But shortly thereafter, under LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson's, came the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to officially end segregation in any way, shape, or form in this nation. And that's keeping with their Pledge of Allegiance, which is I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There is no room for segregation in this country. You need to get on the fastest plane out of this country if you are still blinded by Satan and harbor feelings of segregation in your heart. You need to go to some other place. We don't want it here in America. There's no room for that in America. That's not what we are about. And we're defining ourselves this way. All right, now, I'm going to leave this issue in Christianity through the centuries and talk to you about this great emancipation of proclamation did not free all the slaves. Did you know that the Emancipation of Proclamation signed by Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, just before he was assassinated at the Ford Theater in Washington, D.C., did not free all the slaves? The proclamation applied in the 10 states that were still in rebellion in 1863, and thus did not cover the nearly 500,000 slaves in the slaveholding border states of Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, or Delaware, which were Union states. Those slaves were freed by later separate state and federal actions. The state of Tennessee had already mostly returned to Union control under a recognized Union government, so it was not named and was exempted. Virginia was named, but exemptions were specified for the 48 counties then in the process of forming a new state of West Virginia, and 7 additional counties and 2 cities in the Union-controlled Tidewater region. Also specifically exempted were New Orleans and the 13 named parishes of Louisiana, all of which were also already mostly under federal control at the time of the proclamation. These exemptions left unemancipated an additional 300,000 slaves. The Emancipation of Proclamation has been ridiculed, notably in an influential passage by Richard Hofstadter, for freeing only the slaves over which the Union had no power. These slaves were freed due to Lincoln's war powers. This act cleared up the issue of contraband slaves, automatically clarified the status of over 100,000 slaves. Some 20,000 to 50,000 slaves were freed the day it went into effect in parts of 9 of the 10 states to which it applied, Texas being the exception. In every Confederate state except Tennessee and Texas, the proclamation went into immediate effect. In Union-occupied areas, and at least 20,000 slaves were freed at once on January 1st, 1863. The moment portrayed by Lee Lowry in Lincoln, Nebraska. Additionally, the proclamation provided the legal framework for the emancipation of nearly all 4 million slaves as the Union armies advanced, and committed the Union to ending slavery, which was a controversial decision even in the North. Hearing of the proclamation, more slaves quickly escaped to Union lines as the Army units moved south. As the Union armies advanced through the Confederacy, thousands of slaves were freed each day until nearly all, approximately 4 million according to the 1860 census, were freed by July 1865. While the proclamation had freed most slaves as a war measure, it had not made slavery illegal. Of the states that were exempted from the proclamation, Maryland, Missouri, Tennessee, and West Virginia prohibited slavery before the war ended. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln proposed a moderate plan for the reconstruction of the captured Confederate state of Louisiana. Only 10% of the state's electorate had to take the loyalty oath. The state was also required to abolish slavery in its new constitution. Identical reconstruction plans would be adopted in Arkansas and Tennessee. By December 1864, the Lincoln Plan abolishing slavery had been enacted in Louisiana, however, in Delaware and Kentucky. December 18, 1865 was when all the slaves were set free. Let me repeat that for you to hear. December 18th, 1865 was when all the slaves were set free. Let me repeat that for you to hear. December 18th, 1865 was when all the slaves were set free. This is the true Independence Day. Let me repeat that for you to hear. December 18th, 1865 was when all the slaves were set free. This is the true Independence Day. Slavery continued to be legal until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment went into effect. Let me repeat that for you to hear. December 18th, 1865 was when all the slaves were set free. This is the true Independence Day. Slavery continued to be legal until December 18th, 1865. Then the 13th Amendment went into effect. On December 18th, 1865, slavery ended. Secretary of State William Seward issued a statement verifying the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, making the end of slavery official. 8 months later, the 13th Amendment was ratified after the end of the Civil War. Let me read that again. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, was ratified after the end of the Civil War. This is very fine print, and I have to use a magnifying glass. I think it was one of the theologians of the Reformation that said that the fine print of the Bible, if you read between the lines, is justification by faith alone, in Christ alone. By faith alone, in Christ alone, by grace alone. Solo scriptura, solo fide. And this is really fine print here. I'm going to read it again. Ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, making the end of slavery official. The 13th Amendment was ratified after the end of the Civil War. The amendment states, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. There were several debates about the exact language of the amendment in Congress. Some wanted it to include provisions to prevent discrimination against blacks. However, the Senate Judiciary Committee provided the eventual language using the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 as inspiration. President Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, is credited with advocating for the amendment and working to push it forward through Congress. He released the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, stating all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforward and free, forever free. However, Lincoln knew that to legally end slavery a constitutional amendment would need to be created. Just like President Barack Hussein Obama had to push the historic health care reform through Congress back in December of 2010, Abraham Lincoln, before his assassination, had to push this abolishment of slavery through also Congress. The 13th Amendment passed in the Senate in April 1864 and the House in January of 1865. It was ratified by the necessary number of states by December 6, 1865, allowing the Secretary of State to officially ratify it on a national level a few days later. However, according to the CBS News, according to the CBS News, 148 years, Mississippi finally ratifies the 13th Amendment. After 148 years, Mississippi finally ratified the 13th Amendment, which banned slavery. The state of Mississippi did not ratify the amendment until February of this year due to an oversight. Now that was fine print, and I hope that I read it correctly. And then National Freedom Day, I told you, because February is Black History Month, and February 1st is National Freedom Day. And National Freedom Day is a United States observance on February 1st honoring the signing by Abraham Lincoln of a joint House and Senate resolution that later became the 13th Amendment to the United States. Constitution. President Lincoln signed the amendment outlawing slavery on February 1st, 1865, although it was not ratified by the states until later. Major Richard Robert Wright Sr., a former slave, believed that there should be a day when freedom for all Americans is celebrated. While living in Philadelphia towards the end of his life, he invited local and national leaders to meet to organize a movement for a national holiday to commemorate Lincoln's signing of the 13th Amendment. The resulting National Freedom Association proposed having a memorial date to call attention to the continuing struggle for freedom for African Americans since President Lincoln had signed the 13th Amendment on the first day of February. That date was chosen to celebrate National Freedom Day. The first commemoration took place on February 1st, 1942, just before the end of World War II, at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. As it has every year since been, the remembrance included laying a wreath at the Liberty Bell. National Freedom Day's federal authorization is cited at Cornell University's Law School Legal Information Institute. National Freedom Day, the President may issue each year a proclamation designating February 1st as National Freedom Day to commemorate the signing of Abraham Lincoln on February 1st, 1865, of the joint resolution adopted by the Senate and the House of Representatives that proposed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution that resulted in the abolishment of slavery, now and forever. Richard Wright, a banker and educator, led the campaign to hold such a commemoration and led the first observance in 1942. On June 30th, 1948, President Harry Truman signed a bill proclaiming February 1st as National Freedom Day. Before I leave Harry Truman here in 1948, I want you to remember in this Genesee County area that we've never had a citizen of presidential status here. We've only had a cabinet minister under the Eisenhower administration, Arthur Summerfield. He was postmaster general. We've never had a president from this county. And at that time, back when Harry Truman was president, he did beat out a man named Dewey, who was a candidate running against him, and Dewey was from Owasso. But that's not Genesee County, that's Shiawassee County. It is not a federal holiday. Government offices and banks are open for business. In other words, Freedom Day on February 1st is not a national holiday like Martin Luther King Day, where the banks and federal offices are all closed. And the Juneteenth Committee, of which I'm sitting, and Paul Herring is the chair and Catherine Blake is a co-chair, are hoping that President Obama, with his clout, like Lincoln pushed through Congress the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery, will push through the legislation in Congress before he ends his this tenure. President Obama pushed through making June 19th a national holiday, which is African American Independence Day. And we hope that this is pushed through also before President Obama ends his tenure in 2016. On this day, many towns have festivals, while other citizens reflect on the freedoms that the United States honors and to appreciate the goodwill of the United States. Wreath laying at the Liberty Bell has also been a tradition to mark National Freedom Day for many years. Symbols of the day may include a theme about freedom for all Americans. And then, for those of you that may not understand Juneteenth, because it is Black History Month, I have to, it started as a holiday, a state holiday in Texas, Juneteenth, June 19th. Juneteenth, also known as Juneteenth Independence Day, Freedom Day, or Emancipation Day, is a holiday in the United States that commemorates the announcement of the abolition of slavery in the United States, the state of Texas, in June of 1865, and more generally, the emancipation of African American slaves throughout the Confederate South. Celebrated on June 19th, the term is a portmanteau of June and 19th, and is recognized as a state holiday or special day of observance in most states. The holiday is observed primarily in local celebrations. Traditions include public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, singing traditional songs such as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and Lift Every Voice and Sing, Till Heaven and Earth Ring, and readings by noted African American writers such as Ralph Ellison and Maya Angelou. And celebrations may include parades, rodeos, street fairs, cookouts, family reunions, park parties, historical reenactments, dramas, and or Miss Juneteenth contests. The history of Juneteenth, during the background of Juneteenth, during the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, issued the Emancipation Proclamation on September 22nd, 1862, with an effective date of January 1st, 1863. It declared all slaves to be freed in the Confederate States of America in rebellion and not in the Union hands. This excluded Tennessee, Virginia, and Lower Louisiana, which were occupied by the Union. It also announced that the Union would start recruiting former slaves and free blacks to serve in the military, and recruitment began in spring of 1863. Slaves often escaped to Union lines for protection, and many began to serve in the military. In some areas, contraband camps were set up to house the freed men temporarily, as well as start schools and put adults to work. Lincoln had urged the government in the border states, which had remained in the Union, to free their slaves under the system of gradual abolition and compensation, but none did so. Those slaves were not emancipated until the end of the war. Now that's what I had spoke with you about earlier. In 1865, there were an estimated 250,000 slaves in Texas. As news of end of the war moved slowly, it did not reach Texas until May 1865, and the Army of the Trans-Mississippi did not surrender until June 2nd. On June 18th, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger arrived at Galveston Island with 2,000 federal troops to occupy Texas on behalf of the federal government. On June 19th, standing on the balcony of Galveston's villa, Granger read aloud the consensus of the general order. And here in Flint, Michigan, Genesee County, we have, since the 1980s and 90s, the holiday has been more widely celebrated among African American communities. In 1994, a group of community leaders gathered at Christian Unity Baptist Church in New Orleans, Louisiana, to work for greater national celebration of Juneteenth. Paul Herring, that's the man who chairs the Juneteenth committee here in Genesee County, in Flint. Paul Herring started a neighborhood celebration in Flint, Michigan in 1994. As he said, "This is our day to be happy." Juneteenth informal observance has spread to many other states, including Portland, Maine, and in part carried by Texans, expatriates, have celebrated in his cities abroad, such as Paris. Some U.S. military bases in other countries sponsor celebrations in addition to those of private groups. Organizations such as the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation are working toward gaining congressional approval to designate Juneteenth as a national day of observance. Others are working to have its 150th anniversary celebrated worldwide. And I want to close with pray, if you're a Christian, pray that Congress and our president move to make June 19th a national holiday like Martin Luther King Day and Columbus Day and Christmas. We celebrate the birth of Jesus, and we should celebrate African American Independence Day. So you be in prayer about that. I want you to remember, as I'm closing now my show, and see you next week, I want you to remember Jesus is our Savior, Jesus is our healer, He was wounded for our transgression and bruised for our iniquities, and Jesus is our soon coming King. I'll see you at next session.
Clear? All right.